first of all, look at your notes. There may be something that you reflected on that you want to share with the group. Clearly, what you want to be talking about is what did you like about what you saw, what didn't you like, what questions do you have that you'd like to know more about, and if there were any surprises, what surprises were there?
I like the feedback, the discussion between the teacher and the students, the way she initially started not lecturing to them. She brought the students immediately into a conversation. So I thought the feedback was an excellent way to get them involved as a group. I also like the open-mindedness of the students to change their minds. That was neat.
They seemed very comfortable in front of the camera. It made me wonder how long that camera had.
Probably not there first, right?
Yeah.
And finally, I like the way the teacher finally asked them why and how they got their final answer, they derived their final answers.
That led to a question for me because I had those same things as parts that I liked, but they also led me to questions like, did everybody really understand? Because a bunch of people just said, oh, I go with 20, I go with 20. And I knew, yeah, exactly. Or, the lead student, the young woman, when she was insistent, and I don't know the history in that class, I'm imagining that she's a pretty good math student, and as a result, others were willing to follow her lead.
Not realizing why.
Which then made me very happy when the woman to her right, the older woman, was able to explain. But I still left wondering about the other people on the L, if they understood.
I think the very next part is the part that is probably going to be the most interesting part. It's where she's going to need to say, okay, so you said it's 2 and 3 and 20, 30, why? Like, how does that make sense? Why does that make sense? I love the fact that, like you said, there was the asking for and accepting of a lot of different answers without coming to a quick conclusion. I did have a question, which I always have in my own class, which is, what happens when you don't come to a quick consensus? What happens when you get somebody insisting it's 30, and the rest of the class is insisting it's 20? And that, it leads to a good discussion, hopefully. But it can be a little bit tricky sometimes. Like, I was sort of waiting or hoping for a holdout in a way.
For the young man who was so insistent at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, what's up with that? Yeah. And then the people who changed, I'd like to know why they changed, what made them change, and where they came up with the wrong answer. Actually, I think that's almost as interesting as the right answer sometimes.
I would like to have seen them challenged on when the first woman gets 30. What would a 30-30 look like? Visualize that,
Pieces of paper on the wall or something, so that the same sort of thing where you actually look at those different dimensions. So if you did the 15, does it look a little skinny?
That would have been good. Yeah. That would have been really interesting if you actually drew out, like, okay, does this one look like they did with the clocks? Because the clock's up there already as a model. And a technology connection, I don't know if anybody's ever done it, but I've never done it and thought about doing it, is on, if you do any kind of picture manipulation whatever, any program you want, pick a program, but there's a little checkbox that says keep this ratio. And if you don't check off that keep this ratio, you end up with a funhouse mirror effect going on in that, and that's because you're changing one dimension without changing the other proportionally. So if people can get that, that's a really good way to show it, like they did with clocks. I thought the teacher did great. It was really interesting.
The other thing that I was curious about was there was no notation accompanying the verbalization. So when somebody's going, 2 inches has got to be 20 inches, or 3 inches. So I would have liked to at least see the numbers up there. 1 inch equals 10 inches, 2 inches equals 20 inches. So for those people who maybe didn't understand it on the side, maybe they might start to see that pattern, that it's a by 10 thing that's going on.
And I would have liked, if somebody didn't get it, maybe to continue that pattern. Okay, so if it was 2, it was 20. If it was 3, and it was 30. What about 4? What if it was 4 inches? Then what would it be? What if it was 5? And then they start, like you said, continue the patterns that they can see. That it was really nice to see not a quick, not what often happens, which is a quick, premature getting to the answer, which students often want, frankly. Nobody in that class did which is good. That's a good sign. That means she's probably done other kinds of teaching like this, because I didn't hear anybody go, okay, so it's 30 next. What's number 3? That's usually what they end up doing. And I didn't see any of that, so I'm thinking she's probably used other kinds of things like that, maybe from Empower or wherever else. Really get it.
And there was a man at the end who was like scrambling, taking notes, and I was thinking, and he was erasing something, and I thought, oh boy, I really am not sure at all that he gets what's going on here. And the pre-part of the video might have been interesting to know, did they revisit that idea of proportion? You know what I mean? Yesterday we talked about proportion. What do you remember about that? Instead of like kind of plunging in and assuming.
That's kind of a question I had. At what point do we see this class? Like, how much ratio and proportion have they done? Like in the last whatever amount of time? That would be interesting to know. Right. Because this can't be their first exposure. I don't think.
Right, because they all kind of knew what she was looking for.
They seem to understand the question at least.
That's a ratio and proportion question.
That's right.
Or what is meant when somebody says, we need to keep the picture in proportion.
I usually use things like, I'll talk about when somebody blows something out of proportion. What does that mean? So you blew that all out of proportion. So what? What does that mean? You tripped over somebody and you like had a heart, you're like, wow, what was that?
And of course, we know in some of our classes, not all of those students might have been there for those previous lessons.
Yes, that makes it very, that's a good question for the teacher. I didn't write that, but that's a really good question. So how do you get the people who missed the last 2 classes in on this discussion? Like, how do you get them, how do you catch somebody up without, that's always hard.
Derailing everybody else.